Was the P51 Mustang as good as people say? Let's find out. With the Battle of Britain taking its toll on British aircraft production, there was a need for a new aircraft that could take the strain off the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Britain showed interest in the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, the Bell 39 Air Cobra, and with lesser excitement, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. None were their first choice, but that was the best the Americans had, and the British could not wait for any new designs. They decided the P-40 would be their best choice. Curtiss Aircraft was given contracts to place their facility at full capacity. James H. Dutch Kindleberger, president of North American Aviation, was asked in February of 1940 to consider building P-40s for Britain. However, Edgar Schmude, the chief designer at NAA, believed they could design and build a better fighter plane. Kindleberger had convinced Britain's Sir Henry Self of the British Purchasing Commission that North American Aviation could design and build a new fighter that was better than the P-40 in the time it would take to tool up to build P-40s. This was despite North American Aviation being smaller than other manufacturers at the time, for example Boeing or Consolidated. The British approved this decision on the 10th of April 1940. After 78,000 man-hours and 102 days later, on September 9, 1940, the prototype, NA-73X, rolled out of the hangar. However, on its first test flight, on November 20, 1940, test pilot Paul Balfour had to guide the prototype to land after the Allison engine cut out. Landing in a ploughed field, the main gear dug into the soft soil and the aircraft flipped over, causing much damage, resulting in the prototype not flying again until January 13, 1941. On 9th of December 1940, the British Purchasing Commission sent a letter to North American Aviation stating that the NA-73 airplanes had been given the official designation of Mustang. By the end of 1941, the RAF accepted 138 Mustangs, with more coming each month, with further developments happening, improving the P-51. In June of 1942, the US placed an order for 310 P-51As. The P-51A was a very capable aircraft, but did lack in high altitude performance, because the Allison V-1710-39 lost considerable horsepower above 20,000 feet. Due to the lack of high altitude performance from the Allison engine, the idea of mating the Merlin 10 engine with the P-51 was thought up by Rolls-Royce test pilots Ron Harker after test flying the Mustang Mark Is. Due to there not being much difference in shape and size between the Merlin and the Allison engine, meaning a straight swap could happen without having to change the engine cowling of the Mustang, this new pairing seemed to almost complete the development of the Mustang. There were, however, still some teething issues, such as a lack of rearward and downward visibility, gun jamming of the four .50 Browning machine guns, which were mounted at an angle due to them being too tall for the P-51B wing thickness, and not enough firepower overall. Visibility was improved with the introduction of the Malcolm Hood, or bubble canopy as it is better known. The wing section was increased to house the Brownings fully upright, eliminating the jamming. They also added two more of the .50 Brownings to a total of 6. These improvements were designated as the NAA 106 P-51D, the most produced and most famous variant of the P-51 Mustang. In all, over 15,000 P-51 Mustangs of all types were built from 1940 to 1945. So, now that we know the history behind the Mustang, let's debunk some myths. So, for starters, obviously as you can see, the plane wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the British specification and the British need to have another fighter plane to complement the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Then, once it was in development and it was given to the US forces so they could look it over and evaluate it and see how it could fit into their strategic and tactical needs, they didn't really do a lot with it. You know, the prototypes that were designed and designated XB-51, they didn't really do much with it. The US were too preoccupied with other aircraft such as the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38. A great story that illustrates the US being slow to evaluate the P51 and its capabilities was when US test pilot Bob Chilton, who had already flown the prototypes of the Mustang several times, went to Wright Field in October of 1941. He saw the XP51 sitting on the ramp and the tarmac, but noticed that only 1 hour had been added to its flight log since it had been delivered, which is insane. You know, an hour's flight time is nothing in these aircraft that would, if they survived, they would fly tens to hundreds of hours, you know, as long as, like I said, they survived and they could be maintained. So for 1 hour and it just be dismissed, you know, really goes in with that theory that I was saying before about it wouldn't exist without the British, and then when it was given to the US they didn't really want it, but then later in life, you know, it's lauded as this amazing plane, which it is. There's no denying that it is an amazing aircraft. It's beautiful to look at, not as beautiful as the Spitfire. You know, so people can sometimes forget and get lost in the details, and I'm not trying to be one of those people, oh well, did you actually know? You know, it's not one of those. I just like to highlight things that you might not necessarily know about aircraft and events that happened. And a big one for me, a myth that's annoying me for quite a while, is actually in Saving Private Ryan, obviously amazing World War II film. Obviously there's historical inaccuracies. I would possibly count this as maybe one. So towards the end of the film, if you haven't watched it, spoiler alert, but chances are, if you are a viewer of this channel on my Instagram, you are interested in the Second World War, so you've probably seen it. Anyway, towards the end of the film, Matt Damon's character, Private James Francis Ryan, and they're fighting the Battle of Ramelle, which obviously didn't exist, but anyway. They're fighting in this battle, there's tigers, there's loads of infantry, and it's kind of a last-ditch effort, and they're running to cross the bridge, to blow the bridge. And Tom Hanks' character is very famously shooting at the tank with his pistol. Obviously, you know, pistol's not going to do anything, but, you know, he's trying his best. But right in that moment, who comes to save the day? P51 Mustangs fly in, strafe the ground troops, destroy the tanks. And Matt Damon's character actually says to Tom Hanks' character, they're P51's tank busters. Now, I would argue, and again, this isn't me going actually, but I would argue that P51s weren't tank busters. Yes, they may have been used in an air-to-ground role in some capacity, but I would argue that the Typhoons that were used by the RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force, they were the tank busters. They were used heavily in air-to-ground missions throughout Normandy. You know, D-Day onwards, they were used. And you can just look at any picture of a Typhoon and you can see that they are tooled up to the teeth with rockets and bombs. And even later, Spitfires were also converted to participate in these air-to-ground attacks as well. So, you know, and even if you think to the series of the Masters of the Air, the P-51s were escort planes, and they, with their drop tanks, they could fly, as they were kind of later ended up being, escort planes for the B-17 bombers, who could fly all the way to Germany and all the way back. That was what they were perfect at doing. You know, the ground attack role was for other aircraft, and it's just a little thing that's always irked me, and I just kind of wanted to get it off my chest, really. And, you know, like I was saying before, you know, I think I'm guilty of getting caught up in the nostalgia, and oh, isn't it an amazing looking plane, an amazing sounding plane? And they all are, you know, Spitfire, Hurricane, P-51, you know, they all are, Lancaster bomber as well. But I think a lot of the times, I think the P-51 kind of gets a pass on all the history that's behind it, because it's like, oh yeah, but it was the greatest fighter plane of the war. And you can get caught up in that, and you can go into top trumps as well, and that isn't what this is about. But like I said before, I just like to bring you stories and facts about things that you might not have known before or heard about before. So yeah, that's a quite detailed, in-depth look at the P51 Mustang. It was really interesting to read and research and learn about it all, and to see some of the differences in how, you know, the Spitfires and Hurricanes were produced compared to the timeline of events with the P51. So anyway, with that being said, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've enjoyed my new little setup. I've been trying some new things. If you didn't see on the Instagram, I had a bit of a rearrange and put some really nice artwork on the wall. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. It really helps me out. you know, I want to keep it going. I really want to grow this channel. I want to let the stories be told and things to not be resigned to the history books. So yes, and stick around for plenty more on here and on the podcast. So yes, thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.